I'm trying to think about the pedigree on this. There was a game called Sun and Storm that came out in 1991 or 2 that did this. And then Street Fighter, the White Wolf game Street Fighter, did it. But I don't think the original Vampire and Mage did it. I think I don't know, and I don't know what happened. Those editions completely confuse me, so I can't say anything about the development of the system. So anyway, Benny, what did you have in mind?
So I was just thinking, with regard to the 3 categories Zach was mentioned, when you were talking about the orthogonality of the presence attacks in the champions, would you consider that as a separate category? Would it be more like responsive? Would it be kind of within the concept of responsivity?
It seems pretty responsive to me. I mean, at least that's in practice. In practice, because all of a sudden you'd sworn that you would never reveal your girlfriend's super secret identity, but you didn't know. But you knew that she was Death Skull's daughter, right? And she swore you never to tell anybody, and you just decided that it's time to tell Death Skull. Right, and she's not going to like it. Right, it's very X-Men, very Claremont X-Men. You know, whatever.
Sure.
The word balloons are almost doing damage. They're so consequential in the middle of the night. You know, but I think of it as like but it's such its own parallel system too. You just have to take it all together as one big system with these 2 orthogonal components. Is sort of my thinking anyway.
So here's my question for all of you. So we've been talking a lot about because again, trying to get at best practices, what's exciting, what's interesting. Ron said you thought it's always very exciting when there's this thing coming at you, like, what do I do? Which is very different than, of course, roll initiative, be on your phone, wait your turn. Oh, my turn. I'll do this thing that's sort of not consequential. And we can beat up on that dead horse all we want, but I think the difference between those 2 things is the place of stated intentions. Well, I would say in the fiction it means actions in motion, but I think in play it means stated intentions. I know this is happening now, or I've committed to doing this action. So, hypothesis. Is it a better practice to have stated intentions in some way, or like in Mouse Guard or Burning Wheel, scripted action? Somehow you've committed to something, and those commitments are in motion, and then you have choices about responding to them. Is that a best practice in this kind of game, not the other 2 categories?
In this kind of game, I think that it's very important. In the case...
Say that again?
In this kind of game, I think it's important, although I don't know about mandatory. I can think about some games that I like a lot where it's not part of the scene, but I do like it. I do something weird in Circle of Hands, where you actually state your intention for the next action at the end of your turn, so that everybody can see what it looks like your character's about to do. Now, you are allowed to change it up, but it has to be role-played as a change-up. And the point is that everybody knows what it looks like your character's doing, what direction they're looking, what motion their body is making, and so that means that their actions are all responding to that. So since it's not a standard role-playing thing to do, it's very easily dropped during play because people are not used to doing it, and I always kind of cry a little when I see that.
It does something else also. Like if I say that my character is gonna slash his face, then I feel kind of committed to do it in the next round, even if that's not very convenient for me.
That's a good thing, though, isn't it? Because your character
I mean that if I want to change it, that then I'm committed to it to choose this action, as my character was committed to do it a moment ago. So the fiction works with the what people feel at the table.
Yeah, and also it's fun to role play your character changing their mind visibly.
Yes.
Right, that's one reason why I kept that is and like it so much is that if I do change my game, which I have the option to do, it's fun for me to say, here it is, the sword's coming down at them, and then I kind of, jolt and then turn and shoot off my spell at that guy instead. But you can see that I chose not to, So,
Well, it's interesting. This is why my players wanted to lynch me.
right.
Is because I wanted to add. There was like there's a variant initiative rule where you state your intent first. This is for D&D. You state your intent. Yes, fifth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you state your intent first, and depending what you're doing, you get a different die because different actions will take different amounts of time, right? So like if you're casting a spell, you'll get just like a D4 or a D6, right? And then if you're doing a faster move, you'll get a bigger die, right? So that puts a little strategy in there because you can do something in order to affect your chance of going first, right? But they hated it because they said, well, I don't know what I want to do until I see what else is going on. You know what I mean? So
that's where you get everybody in a
yeah.
defensive crouch until they get their moment of freedom, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's an interesting thing. There is a safety zone there, right? There is a safety zone of being able to say, well, I want silence so that I can shout into it if I have to. Yeah.
But there is, my experience with 5th Ed is it doesn't give you many options where you want to. You would pick this or this or this. There's always this optimal, I will do this now because I'm a fighter and I hit the thing with a sword, so that's what I have to do. In my experience with 5th Ed, but that
leads us to another issue of ordering. What's the point of ordering if your option is pretty much just an obvious optimum every time?
Meaning to go first every time.
Well, not only that, but if you're not allowed to go first every time, how am I going to put this? This seems related. All of this seems related to the idea of how many things could I choose to do at this moment. How many things could I choose to do that each would have some way of impacting what's going on? They're just very, very different. Just to take Circle of Hands, it's the reason why everybody's a wizard. Or rather, not a full wizard, but everybody can cast spells.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by definition, depending on what spells you've chosen, a lot of the time you are choosing between weapon and spell. And that's for everybody. And I'm trying to think of other games where with Champions, to go back to these games that are on my mind, with Champions, one of the most important things is whether you're going to try to recover right now or not. Because you're burning your energy so fiercely that maybe right now is a good time to try to recover. What's my situation? Maybe I should just take a break this time. Duck behind something and just breathe a little bit instead of jumping to the attack. And you can choose to jump to the attack, but you'll be burning critical resources to do it. So I'm thinking that ordering matters or is more fun when a given character most of the time has more than one possible thing to do, and that the optimum is not obvious except in edge cases. Sometimes the optimum is just the optimum, but that should be the minority of situations, not the majority.
It's really interesting that you point that out because, Manu, your system pack introduces like this concept of speed as a stat, for lack of a better word, where speed means something like priority in ordering. And so to make that not the best thing of all time, you have to have some kind of, the word that you didn't say, Ron, that I heard was trade-offs. You have to have trade-offs, and therefore you have to have different resources that are not, no one of them is the correct resource, right?
Right, but they're all there, right, or different things are there. And one of those resources is actually your potential to do damage in the moment. That also counts, right?
So, for example, when we played 4th Ed, we were often trading off between I will do a big attack. This was a game with Ron back, or I will engage in a skill challenge that is running alongside potentially this combat.
That's why I liked that. That's why I liked folding the skill contests into the fights when we played 4th edition, was because it just made the whole thing so much richer. And it was also, but you paid the price. The person who stayed in the fighting side of it knew they were going to be eating a lot of damage to do it. So
that's why you have a big Minotaur in armor.
That's right.
And
That's right. I bloodied him all the time, damn.
But you've also got, in terms of those meaningful choices, you've got the sort of venue where you do it on your go, and or where you have choices you can make while other people are doing things in a more responsive way. Again, 4th Ed does a lot of this, but
right.
Did you like all of this about 4th edition, and to what extent did you find
there was a big learning
cooperative action?
Yeah,
that's what I've heard.
We scratched the surface of being able to do it well and make it really interesting, but the potential was certainly there for it to really.
When we got that rolling, I loved it. There were
some really nice bits in the like. Sorry, go ahead.
Ross, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say there were some of the later encounters that we did were sort of really simple things like holding my action until I see what this person involved in the fight, let's call them an enemy, but they weren't necessarily, what they will do, and then responding to that at that point really shifted entirely how some of the encounters went, which was.
I also, there are lots of aspects of it. The unexpected movement plays a role in this as well. There's some dialogue going on about this right now. It's a complex dialogue across 3 different topics right now. There's a topic about mapping and movement on maps. There's a topic about designing a particular guy's game. And there's a topic about hero points, spending hero points as a resource. And they all these conversations at the moment at Adepts Play overlap.
And we can make it worse. Go and look at the old videos from us playing 4th Ed D&D, and you can comment on those, and then we can really.
I know. Where I wanted to create a library of resource for talking about role playing, and now we're cursed with a library of resource about role playing. We have. I found that good, but I agree there was a learning curve, and the problem with the learning curve is that it's only as good as its slowest member. And I thought it was kind of important what Herman, what you said, which is that in this particular case, the curse was the words D&D.
Yeah.
We played much better when one of us finally scrubbed out from their minds that there were specific tropes and expectations of D&D that he didn't have to do. Because every time he tried to do it, he disrupted the potential of the system we were actually using.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, the game was better than its label. But what else? What are some other like little ahas or extras or oh wait, we did it this way, or oh wait, this game does it that way that people have experienced?
One thing that people haven't mentioned yet is there was one. I think it was a version of Marvel role-playing game where you could pass your initiative. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Marvel Heroic. So someone has someone's turn, and then they choose who goes next, and that could be someone on the other side.
That's right. And whoever goes says who goes next. Yeah.
Yeah, but also if you fail your action, right, then the bad guy goes. There was something like that. That might have been a house rule.
You attack somebody. And they get a defensive response, and depending how that defensive response, you may have noticed, I'm considering running this. They get a defensive response, but depending on how effective that is, they may be able to turn that into a actual attack that also attacks you. Although it doesn't change their ordering in. You still get to choose who goes
your
next,
attack, but they get a punch in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Do you also get to choose? Could you choose? You want a villain to go next?
Yeah, because that's actually important because you see your dice are used up. Goes. Right, you can actually make the villain kind of blow their resources so that your big guy can come in on top.
And obviously, the villain gets to hit you, and you get to roll in response, and maybe you get to hit them in response because you roll so well in your defense.
But the villains start with enormous advantages. And also, what's interesting in that game is that the villains. Now, Ross, you'll have to check me on this because I've only read it. But
I've only read it too. I've read too much.
In fact, this is the case in the Saga version too. in the Saga version and in the Marvel Heroic, which are respectively the second and fourth Marvel games, the villain builds up a bank as the fight goes on. The villain builds up a bank,
Potentially.
and you got to look out. You got to take them down before they get really nasty. Manu, am I right? I mean, it's my go. I'm playing Cyclops, and I have to have enough system mastery to look at everybody's dice pool at the moment, because everybody in that game has this really complicated dice pool.
I think it exists in the world of the ultimate thing you must be able to do in a Marvel game is the fastball special.
Right.
And therefore, we will allow it to happen by having you get to choose that Wolverine's going next because you've thrown him somewhere.